I never thought the moment that would shake my entire marriage wouldn't be cheating. Not lies, not betrayal in the way people usually imagine, but my husband calmly telling me over supper that he wanted to have a child with another woman. And the worst part, I didn't even know if I had the right to say no. I remember just sitting there at our dining table, staring at him, wondering if I'd misunderstood something. Maybe I'd missed a word. Maybe he meant donating, something distant, clinical, detached. The sort of thing people quietly arrange through a fertility clinic and never speak about again over Sunday roast with the family. But the way he looked at me, steady, almost hopeful, told me I hadn't misunderstood at all. This was real. This was something he had already thought through, and all at once I felt like I was the only person in the room who hadn't been included in the conversation. It happened 3 days ago, but I can still replay every second of that night like it's been burned into my mind. We were having dinner. Nothing special, just one of those quiet weekday evenings where the telly is off and you actually talk. I remember feeling normal, safe, comfortable. 6 years of marriage has a way of making everything feel predictable, like you know the rhythm of your own life. The kettle whistles in the morning, someone forgets to put the bins out, one of you says, "Long day?" while the other puts plates on the table. Ordinary things, familiar things, things that make you believe you know exactly where you stand. And then he brought her up. He said her name so casually, like it didn't carry any weight. Like she wasn't someone he had once been with, someone he had shared a history with before me.
I knew of her, of course. He'd mentioned her over the years. An old friend, he'd always said. And I believed him. I never felt threatened. I trusted him completely. There had never been a reason not to. But that night, everything about that friendship started to feel different. He told me she wanted a child. I remember blinking, nodding slowly, trying to follow where the conversation was going. Plenty of people want children. That wasn't unusual. Then he said she had asked him to be the donor. That's when something inside me shifted. Not fully broken, not yet, but something definitely cracked. I didn't react straight away. I didn't shout. I didn't accuse him of anything. I just asked questions. Because that's what you do when something feels too big to process. You try to make it smaller, more logical, something you can actually understand. I asked him what that meant exactly. He explained that she had always wanted a child and didn't want to wait for a relationship anymore. That part I could understand. It wasn't traditional, but people do that. Women choose to become mothers on their own. It happens. It's not the sort of thing my mom's generation would have talked about openly, but it happens all the same. And for a brief moment, I thought maybe this was just that. A donation, a boundary, something clinical. But then he told me the part that changed everything. She didn't just want a donor. She wanted him to be the father, actively present, involved. I felt my stomach drop like I'd missed a step on a narrow staircase. I remember staring at him, searching his face, hoping, really hoping, that he would laugh or say he was joking or that it wasn't serious. But he didn't. He just kept talking, like this was a perfectly reasonable thing to bring into our lives. And suddenly my mind started racing. I asked him whether it wouldn't be difficult, knowing that somewhere out there he had a child he couldn't fully be with. I thought maybe that would make him reconsider. Maybe it would make him realize how complicated this was. But instead,
He told me something that made my chest tighten. He said that was the problem. He didn't want to be absent. He wanted to be involved. He wanted to be a father.
And that's when I realized this wasn't hypothetical. This wasn't a discussion in the abstract. This was something he had already emotionally committed to.
And I hadn't even known. I tried to explain why it made me uncomfortable. I told him, carefully, calmly, that the situation felt far too intimate. That it wasn't just about having a child. It was about who he was having that child with. Because this wasn't a stranger. This was a woman he had once been with. A woman he had shared a bed with. A woman who now wanted to raise a child with him.
Even if they weren't together, how was that not crossing a line?
But the more I tried to explain, the more I felt like I was the one being unreasonable. He told me I was overreacting, that I didn't trust him, that I was being insecure. And hearing that hurt more than I expected. Because the truth is, I did trust him. Completely. I had never doubted his loyalty, not once in 6 years. I had defended that trust, believed in it, built my entire sense of safety around it. That trust doesn't mean you're comfortable with everything. And I didn't know how to explain that without sounding like I was the problem. Then the conversation shifted, and it hit a place I wasn't prepared for. He brought up something I had told him years ago, something I had shared in a moment of vulnerability, thinking it was safe between us. I had told him that I might have fertility issues. It wasn't confirmed. I had never even gone to a specialist. It was just something I'd been told might be a possibility. A concern for the future, not a certainty. One of those half-spoken worries that gets mentioned during a GP appointment and then lodges itself somewhere in the back of your mind for years. At the time, we both agreed it wasn't something to worry about yet. We weren't even planning to have children anytime soon. It felt far away, manageable. Something we would face together when the time came. But that night, he used it. He told me that he had been talking to her for a few days already, that he was considering doing this because if I couldn't have children, he might miss his chance. And I swear, in that moment, it felt like all the air had been knocked out of my lungs. It wasn't just what he said, it was how he said it. Like it made sense, like it was logical.
Like I was a risk factor, not his wife.
I didn't even realize how much it hurt until I felt my throat tightening and my eyes burning. It wasn't just jealousy. It wasn't just fear. It was something deeper. It was the feeling of not being enough. Like I had already failed at something we hadn't even tried yet. Like my body had already disqualified me from a future he wanted. And somehow, he had already started building that future without me. We started arguing after that. Not yelling at first, just that tense, sharp kind of conversation where every word feels like it could cut something open. He said I was being selfish, that he had always wanted to be a father, that I couldn't expect him to give that up. And I remember just sitting there thinking, when did this become me versus him? When did our life turn into something separate? He kept insisting it wasn't cheating, that they wouldn't even have sex, that it was just him having a child with a friend. Like that made it simpler, like that made it fine. But in my head, all I could see was the reality of it. Doctor's appointments, late night phone calls, conversations about names, decisions about the child, Christmases, birthdays, school events, shared responsibilities, emotional connection.
And no matter how he tried to frame it, that wasn't just a child.
That was a life intertwined with someone else. And I didn't know where I fit into that, or if I even did. At one point, he compared it to a hobby, something personal, something that didn't involve me. And I remember thinking, how can you possibly compare raising a human being to a hobby. This isn't a train set in the loft. This isn't Sunday football. This is a child, a person who will exist in his life forever. And somehow, I was supposed to just stand on the outside and accept it? That's when the confusion really started to take over. Because underneath all the hurt, there was this voice in my head asking something I didn't want to face. What if I can't have children? Would it be fair to stop him from becoming a father? Was I being selfish? Was I standing in the way of something he truly wanted? Something I might not be able to give him? And that thought, it frightened me because it made everything feel less clear, less black and white. I wasn't just angry anymore. I was torn between protecting myself and questioning whether I even had the right to. I haven't slept properly since that night. Every time I close my eyes, I see a future I don't recognize. Him holding a child that isn't mine. Him building a bond with another woman, even if it isn't romantic. Me, somewhere on the edge of it all, trying to figure out where I belong. And the worst part is, I don't know what the right answer is. I don't know if this is something people can make work. I don't know if I'm overthinking it, or if I'm the only one seeing how enormous this really is. All I know is, the life I thought I had feels like it's slipping into something I don't understand, and I don't know how to stop it. I barely remember how that argument ended that night. It didn't feel like something that could end, it just stopped. Like we both ran out of energy before we ran out of things to say. I think that's what scared me most. Not the raised voices, not the accusations, but the silence afterwards. We went to bed without touching. No good night. No, we'll sort this out. Just two people lying inches apart, feeling like strangers. I remember staring at the ceiling, my heart still racing hours later, trying to piece everything together. 6 years. 6 years of building a life with someone, and suddenly I didn't recognize where I stood in it. The next morning felt unreal. He got up like usual, made coffee, checked his phone. Same routine, same movements. But everything felt off. Like I was watching a version of our life instead of actually living it. I kept waiting for him to say something, to bring it up again, to maybe soften, reconsider, realize how big this was, but he didn't. And that silence felt louder than anything he had said the night before. I went through the day in a haze. I tried to distract myself. Work, messages, scrolling on my phone, but nothing stuck. My mind kept circling back to the same questions. What does this actually look like? If he goes through with this, what changes? Because he kept saying it wouldn't affect us. But how could it not? I started imagining it in detail, whether I wanted to or not. He would go to appointments with her, be there during the pregnancy, support her. That's what a father does. And if he's going to be involved, truly involved, then he can't just be absent until the child is born. So where does that leave me? Am I supposed to sit at home while my husband builds a family with someone else? Even if it's not romantic, even if it's just co-parenting, how is that not something that changes everything? And then another thought hit me. One that made my chest tighten. What if he starts feeling something again? Not because he plans to. Not because he wants to. But because proximity does things to people. Shared experiences, emotional moments, raising a child together. Those things bind people in ways that are hard to explain. And they already have a history. I hate that my mind went there. But I couldn't stop it, because I've seen things like that happen. Maybe not exactly this, but near enough. People reconnect. Old feelings come back. Boundaries blur. And I kept asking myself,
Am I being paranoid?
Or am I just the only one acknowledging the risk?
That night,
I finally tried to talk to him again.
I didn't want another argument. I didn't have the energy for it. I just wanted to understand him. Or maybe I wanted him to understand me.
I asked him what he actually imagined this would look like long term. He seemed calmer this time, more composed, like he had already settled into his decision. He told me he would be involved in the child's life, not living with them, not getting back into a relationship with her, but present. Visits, support, being there as a father. And then he said something that made my stomach twist. He said it wouldn't really change much for us. I just stared at him. I didn't even know how to respond to that, because to me, it changes everything. I tried to explain it again, slower this time, choosing my words carefully. I told him that a child isn't something you can compartmentalize. It's not something you can neatly fit into a few hours a week. It grows. It needs. It demands time, attention, emotion, and every bit of that comes from somewhere, from us, from our life together, from the time we share. But he kept brushing it off, like I was exaggerating, like I was creating problems that didn't exist yet. And maybe I was. That's the part that's messing with me the most, because I don't have a clear reference point for this. I've never been in a situation like this. I don't know anyone who has. So I don't know if I'm reacting the way anyone else would, or if I'm just letting fear take over. Then the conversation shifted again, and it hit that same painful place. Children. He asked me, directly this time, what I would do if I couldn't have them, and I froze. Because I had avoided that question for years. Not because I didn't care, but because I wasn't ready to face it. I always told myself we would figure it out together when the time came. That it wasn't something I had to solve alone. But suddenly, it felt like I was alone in it. I told him the truth. That I didn't know, that we hadn't even tried. But I wasn't ready to accept a future where I couldn't have children, especially when it wasn't even confirmed. And he looked at me like that wasn't enough, like uncertainty wasn't a valid answer. He said he didn't want to wait years, only to find out we couldn't have kids. He said he didn't want to lose his chance. And again, I felt that same sharp pain, because it sounded like he had already decided that I might fail him before we even tried, before we even gave ourselves a chance. I asked him if he would still want this, if I could have children. And for the first time, he hesitated, just for a second, but I saw it, and that hesitation said more than anything else, because it told me this wasn't just about opportunity. This wasn't just about helping an old friend. There was something deeper here, something he wasn't fully saying out loud, maybe even something he hadn't fully admitted to himself, and that scared me more than anything else. Because I could argue with logic, I could argue with plans, but I can't argue with something unspoken, something hidden. That night ended worse than the first. Not louder, just heavier. Like everything we said had sunk deeper, settled into something harder to move. And since then, we've barely talked. We're polite, functional, like flatmates who know each other too well. And I hate it. I hate how quickly things changed, how fragile everything suddenly feels. I keep replaying everything, trying to find the moment where this could have gone differently. Should I have reacted differently? Should I have been more supportive, more open? Or would that have just meant losing myself in something I'm not okay with? Because that's the other truth I keep trying to ignore. Even if I understand his desire to be a father, even if I try to be fair, even if I tell myself I shouldn't stand in his way, I still don't feel okay with this. Not even close. And I don't know if that makes me selfish or just honest. The hardest part is imagining the future, because every version I come up with feels wrong. If I say yes, I live with something that hurts me every day. If I say no, I might be taking something away from him that he truly wants. And if neither of us backs down, then what happens to us? What happens to 6 years of love, memories, and everything we built together? I never thought I'd be here, stuck between holding on to my marriage and protecting myself from something that could break me slowly over time. And the truth is, I don't know which one matters more anymore. The 3rd day was the worst. Not because we fought, not because anything dramatic happened, but because everything felt too normal. And that kind of normal is terrifying when you know something underneath it is breaking. I woke up before him that morning. I didn't even realize I hadn't slept until I caught my reflection in the mirror. Puffy eyes, dull skin, like someone had taken the light out of me overnight. I stood there for a second, gripping the edge of the sink, just staring at myself. I didn't recognize that version of me, the one who felt replaceable, the one who suddenly had to question whether she was enough for her own husband. I went into the kitchen and made coffee, more out of habit than anything else. The house was quiet, too quiet. Usually I like that kind of silence. It feels peaceful. But that morning it felt heavy, like something unsaid was sitting in every corner. He walked in a few minutes later.
"Morning," he said, like nothing had happened.
And I swear, something inside me snapped just a little. Not loudly, not in a way he could hear, but enough for me to realize that I couldn't keep pretending this was normal. I turned to him and asked the question I had been avoiding. "Have you already decided?" He didn't even hesitate. "Yes." Just one word. Calm. Certain. Like he had already crossed a line I was still standing in front of. And that's when it hit me. This wasn't a discussion anymore. I wasn't part of the decision. I was just reacting to it. I felt this wave of heat rush through my body, like anger and heartbreak colliding at the same time. My hands were shaking, and I had to put the mug down before I dropped it. I asked him if he had told her yes. He said not officially, but that he had made up his mind, that he was going to do it, with or without my support. And I don't think I've ever felt so small in my entire life, because in that moment, I realized something I hadn't fully allowed myself to see before. He wasn't choosing between this and nothing. He was choosing between this and me. And I didn't know if I was winning. I asked him one last time, probably the most vulnerable question I've ever asked anyone. Do I even matter in this decision? There was a pause. Not long, but long enough. And then he said something that I'll probably never forget. He said, "This is something I need for myself." Not for us, not for our future, for himself. And I think that's when my heart actually broke, because I had always believed that we were building something together. That even when things were hard, we were on the same side. But standing there, looking at him, I didn't feel like his wife anymore. I felt like an obstacle, like something he had to get past in order to have the life he wanted. I tried to speak, but my voice came out weak. I asked him if he had thought about what this would do to me, and he sighed, like I was making things harder than they needed to be. He said I was taking it too personally. Too personally. I nearly laughed, because how is this not personal? How is my husband choosing to have a child with another woman? Not something that affects me at the deepest level. That's when the emotions finally broke through. I told him everything. How it made me feel. How I felt pushed aside. How I felt like I was already being replaced in a future we hadn't even tried to build yet. I told him that this wasn't just about a child. It was about boundaries, about respect, about what it means to be married. And for the first time, he got frustrated, not emotional, not hurt. frustrated, like I was the one complicating something simple. He said I was making it into something it wasn't, that I was projecting fears that had no basis, that I needed to trust him. And I just stood there, staring at him, thinking, trust isn't the issue. The situation is. Because trust doesn't mean accepting everything without question. Trust doesn't mean ignoring your own pain just to prove you believe in someone. And I didn't know how to make him understand that. I asked him something else then. Something I wasn't even sure I wanted the answer to. If I said I'm not okay with this, would you still do it? He looked at me, really looked at me. And then he said, quietly, yes. That was it. That was the moment everything changed. Because up until then, there was still a part of me holding on to hope. Hope that he would choose us. Hope that he would at least hesitate. Hope that I still had some kind of weight in his decision. But hearing that, it felt like the ground disappeared beneath my feet. I didn't shout. I didn't cry. I just went quiet. Because what do you say after that? What argument do you make when the other person has already accepted losing you as a possibility? I walked away after that, not dramatically, just quietly. And I spent the rest of the day alone, trying to process something that didn't feel real. I kept thinking about our wedding, about the promises we made, about the life we talked about building, and I couldn't stop asking myself, when did that stop being enough for him? When did I stop being enough? And then another thought crept in, one that made everything even more painful. Maybe I never was. Maybe this was always something he wanted. Maybe the idea of having a child mattered more to him than I ever realized. And maybe I was just the person who fit into his life until something better matched what he truly wanted. I hate that I think like that. I hate how this situation is changing the way I see myself. But I can't help it, because right now, I don't feel chosen. I feel optional. And I don't know how a marriage survives that. I've been sitting with this for days now, turning it over in my head, trying to find a version of this where no one gets hurt. But I can't, because no matter how I look at it, someone loses. Either I accept something that breaks me slowly, or I walk away from someone I thought I'd spend my life with. And I don't know which one is worse. I don't know what the right choice is. I don't even know who I am in this situation anymore. All I know is the life I thought I had is gone. And whatever comes next, I have to decide if I'm still willing to be part of it. I didn't leave that day. And I think that says a lot about how complicated love really is. Because when something breaks, you imagine it happening in this clean, dramatic way. Like there's a moment where you just know it's over. You walk out, you don't look back, and that's it. But real life doesn't work like that. Real life is quieter, messier. You wake up the next day in the same bed. You see their shoes by the door, their tea mug in the sink. The same little details that used to feel like home now feel like reminders of something slipping through your hands. And somehow, you stay. That night, after everything that had been said, we didn't talk again. Not really. He was in the sitting room, scrolling on his phone like it was just another evening. I stayed in the bedroom, sitting on the edge of the bed, staring at nothing. I kept waiting for him to come in, to say something, anything. An apology, a hesitation, a sign that maybe, just maybe, I still mattered enough for him to reconsider. But he didn't. And I think that hurt more than the argument itself, because silence, especially from someone you love, can feel like rejection without words. At some point, I lay down, but sleep didn't come. My mind just kept replaying everything, every word, every look, every pause. And then something shifted. Not dramatically, not all at once, but slowly. like a realization sinking in. I started asking myself a different question. Not, what is he going to do? But, what am I going to do? Because up until that moment, everything had been about him. His decision, his wants, his future. And I had been stuck reacting to it, trying to understand it, trying to justify it, trying to make it hurt less. But I hadn't really stopped to ask what I needed. And when I finally did, the answer scared me. Because the truth was, I wasn't okay with this. Not in an I'll get used to it kind of way. Not in a maybe it'll be fine kind of way. But in a deep, gut-level way that told me this wasn't something I could live with. And the moment I admitted that to myself, everything became clearer and harder, because clarity doesn't make things easier. It just removes the illusion that they might be. The next morning, I didn't feel as confused. I felt heavy, like I already knew what this was leading to, even if I wasn't ready to say it out loud yet. He was already up when I walked into the kitchen. Same routine, same calm energy. And for the first time, I didn't feel like I was standing next to my husband. I felt like I was standing next to someone who had already chosen a different life. I poured myself coffee, my hands steadier than the day before, and I said it quietly. I can't do this. He looked up, confused at first. Do what? And that question, it almost made me smile, but not in a good way, because it showed me just how differently we were seeing this. This, I said, this situation, this plan. I can't be in a marriage where my husband is building a family with someone else. The words felt solid, real, like they had weight behind them. And for the first time in days, I felt like I wasn't drifting anymore. I was standing. He leaned back slightly, studying me, and I could tell he hadn't expected that. Not really. I think he thought I would eventually come round, that I would process it, accept it, adjust. But I didn't. And now, he had to face that. He asked me if I was giving him an ultimatum, and I shook my head. No, I said. I'm telling you my boundary. And that word, boundary, felt new in my mouth, but also necessary, because that's what this was. Not a threat, not manipulation, just the line I couldn't cross. He was quiet for a moment, and then he asked the question I had been dreading. So what are you saying? I took a breath, and it felt like the air was heavier than usual. I'm saying, if you choose to go through with this, I don't think I can stay. There it was, out in the open. No taking it back, no softening it, just the truth. And for a second, everything went completely still. He didn't react straight away. No anger, no frustration, just silence. And then he looked down, and I saw something in his expression I hadn't seen before. Not regret, not exactly, but something close to it, like he was finally realizing the cost. But instead of stepping back, he stayed where he was. And that told me everything. He didn't say, I'll stop. He didn't say, you matter more. He didn't say anything that would have pulled us back together. He just sat there, caught between two choices, and I could see it. The hesitation, the weight of it, but also the fact that he wasn't letting it go. And I think that's when I understood something in a way I hadn't before. Love isn't always enough, because if it was, this wouldn't be happening. I didn't cry, not in that moment. I think I had already done most of that in the days before. Instead, I just felt calm, a kind of calm that comes after something breaks, when there's nothing left to hold together. I told him I needed time, not to change my mind, but to figure out what my next steps were. And he nodded, like that was reasonable, like we were just discussing practicalities. And that hurt in a different way, because it made everything feel so final. I went back into the bedroom after that and sat on the bed again, the same spot as the night before. But everything felt different, because now I wasn't waiting anymore. I wasn't hoping he would change his mind. I wasn't trying to convince him. I was just preparing for a version of my life that didn't include him. And that thought, it broke something inside me all over again. 6 years of memories, of plans, of love. And it might all end because we wanted different futures, because we couldn't agree on something this big, because he chose something that didn't include me, and I chose not to lose myself trying to fit into it. I don't know what happens next. I don't know if he'll change his mind. I don't know if I'll actually walk away. But I do know this. For the first time since this started, I'm not asking what he wants anymore. I'm asking what I deserve. And I think that might be the only thing keeping me from falling apart completely. I'm still trying to process all of this. What would you have done if you were in my position? Let me know in the comments. And if you want to hear more of my story, make sure you subscribe.